Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So the most important part of how not to get into trouble, stated very simply, is to establish this non-communicable disease link of hyperglycemia and pregnancy. And that is what I will be addressing in the next couple of minutes. So I will be talking, this is the roadmap that I will be taking. I'm sure this has already been discussed, hyperglycemia and pregnancy, pre-existing diabetes and gestational diabetes, whether it's type 1 or type 2. The numbers, yes, they are really going up and the numbers are becoming more and more scary. The implications of gestational diabetes as far as neonatal and maternal outcomes are quite significant. The most important aspect of this is not just what happens during the pregnancy, but subsequently. In other words, it has been linked to offsprings who develop obesity, diabetes, neurodegenerative psychiatric disorders, low intellectual and verbal coefficient, language, motor impairment, attention deficit with hyperactivity disorders, and problems in psychosocial development. So the story does not end after birth. So this is what I will be focusing on. So I'm not addressing what happens during the hyperglycemic environment to the fetus, but what is this fetal programming that results in a host of subsequent disorders. The hypothesis was first proposed by David Barker in 1990 that the intrauterine environment influences the risk of non-communicable diseases. So what is the importance of this intrauterine environment? So we are having the conceptus starting off as a bag of genes, and the intrauterine environment is now going to dictate how these genes function. Even a small change in this environment has the potential to permanently alter the working of the genes and therefore the structure and function of the developing system. The genome transfers the information to the RNA. The factors governing this flow contribute to the development of the differentiation of cells, tissues, organs, and systems, which contribute to the phenotype of the individual. And it was Waddington who described all these processes which link the genotype to the phenotype at birth, and this was called epigenetic. So there is a permanent change in the structure and function of the organism occurring during crucial periods of development, which I am going to call programming. So I think this illustrates it quite nicely. So there are a lot of factors like maternal age has to be taken into consideration, what is the weight of the mother, and what has been her lifestyle. So during the exposure we have this intrauterine programming, which I was addressing. So disturbance of the hormone synthesis, placental development and function. Then early life programming, reprogramming. So you will have a large for gestational age baby, and there'll be more of fat. What happens in adolescence? These are the problems, metabolic problems. So I was just talking about cardiovascular disease as well. And then this is the transgenerational programming. Again, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity. And throughout, we have DNA methylation, histone modifications, which are continuously happening. This is another theory, that is the DOHAD theory, the developmental origins of health and disease, which says that the altered environmental influences, nutrition, metabolism, pollutants, stress during the critical stages of fetal growth predispose individuals to the NCDs in later life. So from the maternal size to the genome to fetal growth development, differentiation, birth phenotype, postnatal growth, environmental exposure, risk factors, morbidity, and then the associated mortality. Periconceptional, intrauterine, and postnatal periods are the most influential in this programming. When we say periconceptional period, that is 12 weeks before and after conception, it encompasses the natural wiping out of the inherited epigenome and the re-establishment of a new one. And this entire process is very vital, and it covers the whole stage till the formation of the whole individual. Interestingly enough, do paternal factors matter? Yes, even there is association with paternal obesity and diabetes, which support a stronger role for the intrauterine diabetic environment compared to genetic predisposition in the etiology of obesity and diabetes in children of diabetic mothers. So what are the factors which are responsible for this undesirable programming and responsible for the risk of later disease? So number one is the maternal nutrition, altered metabolism, infection, then there is exposure to environmental pollutants and toxins, extreme high atmospheric temperature, maternal smoking, as well as maternal stress. So I'll take these problems which arise one by one. Obesity and type 2 diabetes are very, very closely linked to hyperglycemia in pregnancy. So this is a large data, almost 30,000 children, 20 observational studies, a systematic review showed that maternal hyperglycemia was associated with obesity and abnormal glucose tolerance in the offspring. So in gestational diabetes, a higher body mass index was reported for the children of GDM, as well as high 2R plasma glucose from pre-puberty to early childhood. Type 1 diabetes, again, higher body mass index was reported in pre-puberty to adolescence in children with mothers of type 1 diabetes. And there's a high rate of type 2 diabetes from years 2 to 5, as well as early childhood. And the effects of diabetes during gestation in the offspring can be generationally transmissive throughout the maternal line. See, if you look at a white Caucasian baby, this is the body weight, the average body weight at birth. An Indian baby is much less. But look at the overall fat. The fat is much less despite the increase in body weight. The Indian baby has a much more fat mass as compared to the Caucasian. And this is wherein the concept of the thin fat Indian baby has been derived. So the developmental pathways I've tried to highlight, suboptimal maternal nutrition also has a role to play, which will result in placental abnormalities, developmental adaptations, and alteration at the level of the liver, adipose tissue, pancreas, muscle, as well as the brain. So this is the vicious cycle. So you have a woman with gestational diabetes. We would like to control the hyperglycemia. This is the infant of a mother with gestational diabetes with epigenetic and genetic predisposition. And subsequently, we can prevent obesity and diabetes in the youth if we control it well. These women are at much higher risk. And this is the whole concept of trying to prevent obesity, PCOS, and preeclampsia in pregnancy. Okay, so all these have been highlighted, and the bottom line here is the insulin resistance leading to these problems. So what are the early life stressors which affect the developing beta cell mass apart from maternal hyperglycemia? Yes, undernutrition and overnutrition are both important. Uteroplacental insufficiency, corticosteroid therapy may be indicated in some patients, dyslipidemia, and hypoxemia. So all this results in a beta cell mass with an adaptive response in the fetus. So the critical window for these adaptive response to early life stressors, that is right from pre-implantation, post-implantation, and if we consider postnatal versus prenatal, then the prenatal environment exerts a greater effect on the beta cell mass as compared to the postnatal environment. And we have more of animal data which proves that. What about the maternal metabolism and fetal programming? We have substantial evidence which has now shown that maternal diabetes and obesity causing fetal overnutrition influence future obesity and diabetes in the child. Both genetic and non-genetic mechanisms are responsible. So this is the Peterson hypothesis, which suggests that an excessive transfer of glucose and other fuels to the baby in a diabetic pregnancy stimulates fetal islets, causing hyperinsulinemia. And the major hormone which does it is insulin. What Frankel expanded this idea to suggest that there is an increased risk of postnatal obesity, and diabetes was a fuel-mediated teratogenesis. So this was mediated by a stable change in gene expression, which we are now calling epigenetic program, and not on the inherited genetic trait. So this is what I was referring to earlier, the so-called fuel-mediated teratogenesis, which refers to an excess transfer of these fuels, that is glucose, amino acids, fatty acids across the placenta to the developing fetus, which causes a stable change in gene expression affecting not only perinatal, but also long-term outcomes in the offspring. So both in India, both undernutrition and overnutrition have an important role to play. And they are both operating side by side. Now, what we are talking about, focusing on the first 1,000 days of life as the most important window in the programming of health and disease. So the PIMA Indian study, this has been very important in helping us understand what is the importance of pregnancy weight gain. So this was an unparalleled design where every member of the community more than 5 years of age, including all pregnant women, if not already diabetic, was serially investigating with an oral glucose tolerance test every 2 years. So if we look at the data, non-diabetics, pre-diabetics and diabetics, the intrauterine programming of obesity by maternal hyperglycemia was very well shown in this PIMA Indian data. The children born to diabetic mothers had a much higher prevalence of obesity compared to children born in pre-diabetic and non-diabetic mothers. So there are other studies which have confirmed this. By Dabilia et al. This was a subsequent discordant sibling study who looked at the risk of obesity and diabetes in siblings expected to inherit similar amounts of diabetes and obesity genes who were born before or after the development of maternal diabetes. The outcome was obese or non-obese, non-glucose tolerant or hyperglycemic. The study showed that the risk of obesity and diabetes was higher in the siblings who were born after the diagnosis of maternal diabetes. So we have similar studies from Krishna Veni et al. In Mysore, a Danish study by Clausen T.D. et al. And then we have the Chicago Diabetes Pregnancy Studies by Silverman et al. As well. What about the HARPO study? This is in the Belfast Center of the HARPO study. Maternal hyperglycemia had only a weak effect on overweight and obesity in the offspring at 2 years of age. In the Scotland Center type 1 diabetes, there was a significant effect on overweight and obesity at 7 years of age. These results could be viewed in relation to a previous observation that the macrosomic infants of diabetic mothers catch down during infancy, however, only to catch up at the time of obesity rebound and become obese later. This is the Australian carbohydrate intolerance study in pregnant women, where gestational diabetes was diagnosed in the 3rd trimester. There were 2 arms, one with intensive treatment and conventional treatment. The intensive treatment significantly reduced the macrosomia and related problems at the time of delivery, but had no effect on overweight and obesity at 5 years. Both groups were more obese than the background population. So these observations highlight a crucial role for the periconceptual environment in fetal programming of obesity, and they indirectly raise the possibility that non-glucose metabolic abnormalities may also be important. So this is Dr. Yagnik's data. This is Dr. Yagnik's publication rather. And we know that in India, he is the father of the Barker's hypothesis, which he is continually talking about. Again, Dr. Yagnik's data about poor in utero growth and reduced beta cell compensation, high fasting glucose from childhood, which are the harbingers of glucose intolerance in young individuals. Inadequate compensatory insulin secretory response to increasing insulin sensitivity from early life is the major pathophysiological underlying glucose intolerance in thin rural Indians. Smaller birth size, maternal pregnancy hyperglycemia, higher glycemia in childhood herald future glucose intolerance. So this mandates a strategy for diabetes prevention from early life, preferably intergenerationally. So much for obesity and diabetes. What about CVD? Again, prenatal exposure to maternal diabetes has also been shown to be associated with congenital heart disease. A later increased risk of CVD in later life has also been seen. It is unclear whether to what extent this prenatal exposure increases the risk over a lifetime. In this study, it has been highlighted that the exposed offsprings had a higher rate of overall CVD as compared to unexposed offsprings with a hazard ratio of 1.29. A greater rate of early onset CVD was seen in offspring exposed to pre-gestational diabetes, even frank diabetes. So this was early onset in offsprings. It was of similar magnitude, whether it was type 1 or type 2 diabetes. So heart failure, hypertensive disease, deep vein thrombosis, and pulmonary embolism were also significant. There was a higher hazard ratio for offspring exposed to maternal diabetes in each age group in childhood, before 20 years of age, early adulthood, from 20 to 40 years of age, regardless of the type of maternal diabetes. Motor impairment has been seen from early school age in children born from mothers with gestational diabetes. There's been some data on a reduction in cerebellum size. This correlates with decreased number of Purkinje and granular cells. What about cognition? That is involved in the regulation of emotional and social cues. Some studies have shown that maternal diabetes contributed to cognitive dysfunction in school-age children as well. Hyperglycemia during the hippocampal development decreases the synaptic plasticity, reduces memory durability, presumably due to a delay in the normal hippocampal development, which is regulated by insulin and IGF-1 receptors that lead to structural, behavioral, and cognitive abnormalities. Psychiatric disorders like autism has been associated. There's, in some studies, have reported a significantly increased increment in ASD in infants from mothers of gestational diabetes. Yamano and Razi et al., they showed that in utero hyperglycemia reduces the size of the cerebellum. Whether this is physiologically relevant has not been completely resolved. Psychosocial disorders have also been associated. For example, schizophrenia has also been associated in mothers with gestational diabetes. In a Swedish case control cohort study, there was a greater susceptibility of developing schizophrenia in women with gestational diabetes. So therein lies the importance of early diagnosis. So the current practice must be very strictly adhered to. Pregnant women with no risk factors can develop diabetes as early as the first trimester, making it evident that early testing is required. So in our attempts to improve the perinatal outcomes, we should not ignore the long-term outcomes that we know have a very, very strong bearing on this diabetes pandemic. Pre-pregnancy planning is the crux of prevention of fetal programming of these non-communicable diseases. So I have told you about that window, the critical period of fetal programming, which is the window of opportunity we should not miss. So it should be preconceptional, throughout periconceptional period, gestational, and even during lactation. So this is the life circle approach to prevention and treatment of subsequent diabetes. Improvement in the health and nutrition of women in their reproductive age might provide an intergenerational solution to this rapidly escalating epidemic of obesity and diabetes. So this is what is meant by implementation of the reproductive life plan, which CDC has defined as a set of personal goals related to childbearing intentions. So this is used to assess a woman's pregnancy goals and guide the assessment of risk to provide appropriate interventions. So the aim of reproductive life planning is to maximize health before conception to improve pregnancy outcomes. So this is for women of reproductive age, whether it's type 1 or type 2, counseling, risk assessment before pregnancy occurs, the medical decision-making, setting targets, optimal diabetes control, changing medications when required, and this has to be a team or collaborative approach. So we've already discussed the ADA recommendations, which are, I think I will not go into the details. What are the ICMR guidelines for screening of gestational diabetes? Again, I think these have already been discussed. I will not go into details here. The high rates of diabetes and pre-diabetes in postpartum period has also been highlighted by Dr. Yagnik, which showed that one of the highest rates of postpartum hyperglycemia within a short time is seen after delivery in young urban gestational diabetes women. Majority of the risk factors were present before pregnancy, and they proposed that metabolic disturbances were also present. So this has implications for this periconceptional epigenetic program. So maternal dysglycemia, changes in the infant's epigenome, which have been modified by diet and physical activity intervention in pregnancy. This was a secondary analysis of a randomized control trial. So I've already spoken about the why. How it can be done is by diet and exercise, and what is behind it, that maternal gestational diabetes status were associated with modest changes in the DNA methylation, and the impact of high maternal circulating glucose levels on DNA methylation can be reduced by lifestyle intervention in pregnancy. I would like to summarize and give the way forward as well. Maternal hyperglycemia increases the probability of several disorders, which I have tried to highlight. A lot of our women with gestational diabetes would have associated risk factors, long-term benefits to the offspring, are seen if maternal diabetes is well managed. Morphological and functional alteration in the CNS and its relationship with change in gene expression and maternal diabetes, that is quite complex. Children of mothers with diabetes, especially those with a history of CVD or with diabetes complications, have greater rates of early onset CVD throughout early decades of life. And these findings highlight the importance of effective strategies for screening and prevention of diabetes in women of childbearing age. I would like to end by saying that sometimes we forget that an individual is born at conception and not at delivery. Thank you. Thank you very much.